Imagine entrusting your newborn's fragile heart to expert surgeons, believing they will give your child a fighting chance. For years, families entrusted the Bristol Royal Infirmary with their most vulnerable children requiring life-saving heart surgery. But between 1988 and 1995, a tragic failure in pediatric cardiac surgery unfolded, leading to an estimated 170 preventable deaths. This is the story of the Bristol Heart Scandal, an alarming case of medical oversight, systemic failures, and the fight for justice. The Bristol Royal Infirmary, one of the UK's leading hospitals, had a specialized pediatric cardiac surgery unit, where surgeons performed complex heart operations on infants and young children. These surgeries, often life or death, were meant to correct congenital heart defects that, if left untreated, would be fatal. The 1980s and early 1990s were a period of rapid advancements in cardiac surgery. Yet, at Bristol Royal Infirmary, something was deeply wrong. The hospital's pediatric cardiac unit had a significantly higher mortality rate than the national average, particularly in complex surgeries, such as the arterial switch operation. Families came to Bristol with hope, trusting that their children would receive top-tier care. But behind the scenes, serious problems were brewing, problems that would cost dozens of babies their lives. In the early 1980s, whispers of concern started circulating within the British medical community. Doctors noticed an unsettling trend. Bristol's mortality rate for pediatric heart surgeries was nearly double the national average. Data showed that while other hospitals had a mortality rate of 10 to 20% for these procedures, Bristol's rate exceeded 30%. But for years, these statistics remained hidden. At other leading hospitals, this same surgery had an 80 to 90% survival rate. Despite these staggering statistics, Bristol continued performing surgeries. The truth is, many of the deaths were preventable, and the reasons behind them were deeply troubling. The lead heart surgeon at Bristol, Dr. James Wishart, was an experienced doctor, but when it came to modern pediatric heart surgery, he was out of his depth. Wishart and his team lacked expertise in cutting-edge techniques that were being adopted in other hospitals. Dr. Janardhan Dasmana, another key surgeon in the unit, was even less experienced in performing complex infant heart surgeries. Instead of referring patients to specialists who had better survival rates, they continued operating, despite knowing their results were dangerously below standard. Ego over patient safety. Many of Bristol's senior doctors, particularly Wishart, resisted change and ignored outside criticism. Dr. Steve Bolsin, an anesthetist, became increasingly alarmed by the high mortality rates. Bolsin carefully documented the high mortality rates and alarming practices at the hospital. He repeatedly raised concerns with hospital management, but his warnings were ignored. He was met with resistance. The culture of the time was one where questioning authority was discouraged. Hospitals prioritized reputation over transparency. Other anesthetists who noticed frequent surgical failures tried to speak up as well, but were quickly dismissed. Parents weren't told that Bristol had one of the worst success rates for these procedures. Instead, they were given false reassurances, many only learning the full extent of the scandal years later. By 1995, the pressure had become too great to ignore. Dr. Bolsin, frustrated by the hospital's inaction, took his findings public. When the media got hold of the story, it exploded into a national controversy. Parents who had lost their babies at Bristol came forward, realizing that their children's deaths were not isolated incidents. They told us it was just a tragic outcome. But when we met other parents with the same story, we knew something was terribly wrong. In 1995, after relentless pressure, an inquiry was launched. The truth was shocking. Surgeons were performing high-risk procedures despite lacking the necessary expertise, and hospital management had ignored warnings for years. In 1998, The Bristol Heart Scandal became the subject of the largest medical inquiry in British history. The public inquiry, led by Professor Ian Kennedy, was one of the most extensive ever conducted into medical malpractice. Over 2 years of investigation, more than 200 witnesses testified. Thousands of medical records were analyzed. The findings were devastating. Between 30 and 35 babies had died needlessly because of poor surgical techniques and preventable mistakes. Many more children suffered permanent disabilities due to botched operations. The hospital knew about these failures for over a decade, but refused to change. Whistleblowers were ignored, and parents were deceived. Dr. James Wishart and Dr. Janardhan Dasmana were banned from practicing medicine. The chief executive of the hospital resigned in disgrace. The General Medical Council was harshly criticized for failing to act sooner. For families who lost their children, the answers came too late. Many were assured that complications were normal. But as more cases surfaced, parents began questioning the hospital's explanations. The Bristol Heart Scandal changed how we view medical accountability. Today, surgeons must meet higher standards, and patients have greater access to information about hospital performance. The 2001 Kennedy report recommended stricter oversight, mandatory surgical outcome audits, and a culture shift towards transparency. The Bristol inquiry paved the way for patient safety reforms that still shape the NHS today. Before Bristol, hospitals weren't required to publish surgical success rates. Today, every hospital in the UK must track and report mortality rates for major surgeries. The General Medical Council, GMC, tightened its oversight on doctors and hospitals. A new system for reviewing doctors' competence was introduced to prevent unqualified surgeons from performing complex operations. Hospitals are now legally required to be honest with patients about risks and failures. Whistleblowers like Dr. Bolsin are now protected under UK law, ensuring that doctors who expose unsafe practices aren't punished for speaking out. For the parents and families who lost their children, no policy change could bring back what they lost. Many of them spent years fighting for justice, demanding answers that should have been given to them from the start. They lied to us. If we had known the truth, we would have taken our baby elsewhere. We trusted them. They let our child die. The Bristol Heart Scandal is a chilling reminder of what happens when ego, negligence, and secrecy override patient safety. This scandal remains a harrowing reminder of what happens when medical institutions prioritize reputation over patient care. It is a story of failure, but also one of change, ensuring that no child's life is ever risked by silence and negligence again. It's a case that should never have happened, and one that must never happen again. Thank you for watching. If you found this interesting, please like, share, and subscribe for more. Be well.